Thanks for listening to the Farmers Weekly podcast. Do remember you can subscribe to Farmers Weekly magazine and get all the latest news, views and market prices by visiting fwi.co.uk.
The budget is as the budget is. It's not going to change, and part of the reason it doesn't change is because you start untangling the budget, then you suddenly put the whole economy at risk.
Farm Minister Daniel Zeichner insisting there will be no changes to the government's controversial autumn budget. So why has Treasury Minister James Murray summoned farm leaders to inheritance tax talks? A baptism of fire perhaps for Andrew Connan just a week after being elected NFU Scotland president, and Louise meets an aerospace engineer who finds out farming is harder than rocket science.
The Farmers Weekly podcast.
Welcome to the Farmers Weekly podcast. I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Lots to unpack this week, and we start with inheritance tax. Industry leaders are to meet Treasury Minister James Murray to discuss the government's decision to impose inheritance tax on farmers. The meeting comes despite comments by Farm Minister Daniel Zeichner, who, as you heard at the top of the podcast, told the Norfolk Farming Conference that the budget is what the budget is and farming is low on the government's pecking order. Meanwhile, farming protesters have fallen out over direct action as a tractor demo forces Keir Starmer to cut short a visit to Milton Keynes. Hugh, Louise, let's take these one at a time. We'll start with these inheritance tax talks on Tuesday, the 18th of February. Farm leaders and Treasury Minister James Murray, what can we expect?
Yeah, I haven't got a clue, and I'm not going to speculate. But it'll be a very important conversation, and I hope that the outcome that comes is one that is equitable for all, because there needs to be some movement one way or the other on this. Let's just hope it's a sensible conversation and that some sort of agreement can be found.
I mean, it is a significant thing, isn't it, Louise? So we've got this, after what are now months of protests since the budget, that there is this willingness at last to engage with the industry. Treasury and Tax Minister, I understand James Murray MP is going to be there. They're going to discuss these proposed changes to agriculture and business property relief and the impact on the industry. The Tenant Farmers Association, who are going to be in on these talks as well, Chief Executive George Dunn saying that he'll be seeking to assure the minister that he's not calling for the government to U-turn on this policy, but it does need some finessing to avoid these unintended consequences.
Yeah, I'm encouraged, actually, that some talks are going to take place. A bit like you can't really speculate or don't want to speculate on what might come from them. But one of the really strong complaints from the farming community all along was that there was no consultation on this and that there isn't really a great understanding, if you like, of what farming is and what they do. So I think it's good. It's a good thing. It is encouraging that they're going to get together. We have to hope that the talks go well. U-turn, I think we all know that that's unlikely to happen. But hopefully, as Hugh suggested, a compromise position can be thrashed out and that everybody can feel a bit happier with what they come up with.
It's about finding a series of equitable off-ramps, isn't it, to where this situation is now. So we just got to hope that that's where they get to and we can then move forward.
And recognising the challenges that farming has. We heard in the audio Farm Minister Daniel Zeichner saying the budget is what the budget is and we have to work within the budget. Daniel Zeichner making those comments at the Norfolk Farming Conference, where he also suggested that farming perhaps isn't as high on the government's pecking order as farmers would like it to be. Those comments reported in the mainstream media. Hugh, what do you think to what Daniel Zeichner said? It's not what people wanted to hear, especially a farming audience at a farming conference, but did he make a fair point? Is it true?
No, it's not. Yeah, particularly in Norfolk, you sat up there at the conference and he said, look, he's obviously trying to inject some realism into this in terms of, I suppose, the government machine overall, their view on what's going on. But then equally, you can't take away the fact that, it is important. We've said, without farming, there isn't food, yada, yada, yada. So it is important to have it there. Perhaps he's trying to manage expectations, but equally around support, it's back to this whole thing of government needing to give us a plan going forward. And we know there's the much awaited farming plan, the 25-year farming plan, which I think is going to be released sometime towards later this year at some point, which might give us some clarity. But regardless what ministers say, whether they're saying you're bottom of our priority or top of our list or wherever you are, we at least need to know what the plan is going forward. And if you look at things like, I was thinking about it this week, if you look at the beef market is raging away at the moment because of various factors, mainly because of a shortage of material in the market. Okay, there isn't the cattle in the market. Why aren't the cattle in the market? Well, there aren't cattle in the market for lots of reasons, but one of them would be the change to the support system, where people of a certain age have turned around and said, you know what, I was getting this BPS, I'm now getting a lot less if I go onto SFI. I'm of a certain age, I no longer want to have my 25 suckler cows or whatever. So cumulatively, that has caused lots and lots of people to move away from the industry, and it's caused cattle numbers to decline in the UK. And we can see that in the statistics. That's sort of happening elsewhere as well because of other climate-related issues and other things like that. So you're now seeing a huge rise in that market because of tightness of supply. Now, that will at some point will have an impact on retail prices. It will have an impact on consumers. And having a plan going forward saying there is this level of support there or not, at least people can plan for their businesses. But equally, it is important to government because if all of that support diminishes or becomes less attractive, people are going to do less farming. And exactly what we're seeing happening to beef prices will start to happen to other commodities. And then what will that do for household bills? And what does that then do for inflation overall? So it's probably managing expectations in the short term. Perhaps it's the downer before the upper after Tuesday's discussions. Who knows? But equally, stay with us here, Minister, because we have got lots to give. We have got an essential part of whatever we do as part of the nation. And yeah, probably not the most helpful comments, but equally he's being realistic, I suppose. He's trying to manage expectations, but it's not helpful, is it?
It's not helpful. And Louise, after Daniel Zeitner made those comments, he was taken to task by Farmers Weekly Arable Farmer of the Year and indeed Farmers Weekly Farmer of the Year, Mark Means. You know Mark a little bit, a very measured man, a good farmer, and that says something when he confronts the minister in a polite but firm way to get his message across himself.
Yes, it does, and we actually did catch up with Mark Means at the first London protest, and he was very clear about you can't invest in your business or grow your business with the situation that we've got at the moment. The Daniel Zeitner comments, I think you can look at those in two ways, really. I mean, pecking order was probably a bit of an unfortunate term, but of course you have to remember the farming community isn't that large. So when it comes to actual votes, and what government's chasing, the farming community doesn't represent that many votes. So I sort of understand what he meant by that, but I think he probably could have chosen some different words and been a bit more supportive of the industry that he is supposed to represent.
Yeah, I mean, he could have said, yeah, politically, you are less than 0.1, 0.2% of the electorate. I think it's 0.1%, so actually you're a nano dot. You are 4% of the turnover of the rural economy. So you're a nano. He could have put it like that as opposed to saying how he did. But the other thing as well, I suppose, he's not doing... Daniel Zeitner strikes me as he's not daft. He spent years cultivating relationships with the industry when he was in a shadow position. And I get that it's very different when you finally get the job and you get into government. And then he's coming along and saying stuff like that. And either he's trying to distance himself from warm relationships that he may have built up. I don't know. It just strikes me. It's just not a really sensible thing to do. And then it comes back to the delivery of all this policy, whether it's climate related or whatever. It will take, as we say, time and time again, if you want to deliver on net zero, if you want to deliver on all these policies, if you want to feed the nation, if you want to keep the shopping basket affordable, it takes cooperation with the industry, and comments like this don't help.
Now, such was the hoo-ha over Daniel Zeichner's words that the furore got a mention during Prime Minister's questions. Conservative MP Harriet Cross put Keir Starmer on the spot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Farming Minister told a conference of farmers that farming is not high in the pecking order for this government. Given the heartless family farm tax, is his minister correct? Yes or no?
Farming's top of the agenda, so far as I'm concerned. That's why we put £5 billion to support farmers in the budget. They failed to spend £300 million on their watch on farming. And we set out our roadmap, which has been welcomed by the NFU, as she very well knows. It was described as long overdue. I wonder who didn't do it before.
Keir Starmer there insisting that farming is top of the government's agenda and highlighting the £300 million underspend on agriculture by the previous Conservative administration. That was on Wednesday, and the Prime Minister was in the thick of it again the following day when a demonstration by the Farmers to Protest Action Group forced him to cut short a visit to Milton Keynes. Now, that Farmers to Protest demonstration was condemned by other farming groups. The Save British Farming Group said disruptive tactics did not represent the industry's best interests. And NFU President Tom Bradshaw said the protest was misjudged and massively counterproductive. Hugh, we've spoken about this before. Direct action. It's a high-risk strategy. Yes, it can win you headlines, but it also risks losing support. The Farmers to Protest demonstration, 5 days before the government has agreed to talk to the industry, right or wrong?
I absolutely get where we are in terms of, people's frustrations, people's anger, people's fear, people's despair in terms of why should I carry on doing what I'm doing for zero margin, yada, 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 and then I've got to chuck it all away and the next... I get all that, but then just thinking about the protest and what's happened there, phenomenal show of force, tour de force, again in London on Monday, okay? You can't deny that. Coming together, the industry, phenomenal, great. But then this one, I just think where you actually impede people, you don't do any favours, do you? Whether it's the Prime Minister or it's Mrs. Miggins on her way to the shop, it does not help. And that's as much as I'm going to say on it, really.
So Farmers to Protest taking this direct action, and that direct action being condemned by Save British Farming and the NFU. Look, you can understand, I guess, Tom Bradshaw, NFU president, you can understand his frustration at this direct action coming so close to these talks with Treasury Minister James Murray and top Treasury officials. It's not ideal, Louise.
No, it's not ideal, but everyone's frustrated, aren't they? So those particular farmers who went to Milton Keynes, they're very frustrated, just as other people in the industry are too. So the government, it's taken far too long, really, for them to accept or acknowledge that there may be some things that need addressing in the announcements that came out of the budget. So everyone's frustrated. It's a really difficult one, this, isn't it? And as Hugh rightly says, peaceful protests, we're all allowed to do that. I think the trouble is they hadn't seen much action up to now. Hopefully after next week, we're going to be in a better place.
Hi, I'm Mark Lempriere, Lombard's Agricultural Sector Lead for London and the South East.
And I'm Stephen Gillis, Lombard's Agricultural Sector Lead in Scotland.
At Lombard, we have a national team of dedicated agricultural relationship managers supporting your sector. We're asset finance experts for agriculture.
We know farming's changing and evolving. We're here to support you in any way we can. We fund assets that could improve efficiency, increase production capacity, and potentially save your business money.
This could be with new agri-tech equipment, updates to machinery, or simply by sharing our financial know-how. It's not just about funding the assets. We take pride in the strong relationships that we've forged within the farming community.
It's a privilege to work with farmers, to understand your daily challenges and to look for ways to help you grow.
Let's chat to see how we can help your business thrive.
Search Lombard Agriculture today. Security may be required, product fees may apply, finance is only available for business purposes.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly podcast. Welcome along wherever you're listening to us from. You can email us podcast@fwi.co.uk. And if you're in the UK itself, you can also message us by texting the word farm followed by your message to 88440. We'd love to hear from you, your thoughts and feelings about what's going on in UK agriculture, from the weather to inheritance tax and everything in between. Do get in touch and get it off your chest. Hugh, something on Facebook caught your eye this week?
Yeah, it did. And it's one of those things that I think, when you get these series of inventions that change the world type thing, and or unsung heroes, things that have made everyone's life easier. And it came up in my Facebook feed this week, a bit of video from the Kverneland factory. I'm not sure where that is, this particular factory. Kverneland, of course, bought the rights to Accord, which was I think they were German originally, Accord Drill Company. The last DA drill was manufactured this week, and those are the piggyback ones that everyone had 30 years ago. I've still got one, and it's brilliant. It's a piggyback, like a combi drill thing, goes on the back of the power harrow, but the last one came off the production line. And I was just thinking, how many millions of hectares of DA drills covered? And actually, when you have autumns like we had the other year on the old combi drills, I know they're not, Louise, you'll get very upset because they're not very good for the soil and the carbon and all that. Get the old plough out and do a bit of traditional farming. But by crikey, you can get some corn in the ground when it's wet and horrible and muddy. So yeah, last DA drill off the production line this week, paying tribute to that. It's been superseded by something else. I don't know. There's lots of other ones on the market as well, but I thought it was a poignant thing to remember.
Good stuff, Hugh. And Louise, any messages, any fan mail for you this week?
Yes, I have had an email this week from somebody called Stuart, and he is making the point, and I think we would probably agree with him, that farmers must take the public with them. So he is talking about, he entitles this email, "On My Tractor in My Own World." So I think we know what's coming next. He said, if you were driving the slurry injection machine that went from Long Sutton to King's Lynn without pulling over once, then do you really think that's a good thing when you had so many queues of cars behind you and you want the public to support British farming just at the moment? So Stuart is saying he has got concerns about the future of farming and he would like us to highlight this issue. So it's just a little reminder, pull into one of those safe lay-bys when you get the chance, guys, if you're travelling that slowly for that far distance on a main road.
Yeah, that'd be the dreaded A17 from South Lincolnshire into Norfolk. One of the busiest single carriageway A roads. Do they still call them trunk roads in the country? Not many places to pass and tempting to overtake in places that you shouldn't. So do take care there on that road and pull over when you can.
That's 14 miles. Do you realise that? Long Sutton to King's, 14 miles. That's too long. I try and pull over every couple of 3 miles. I don't do much road work. I get that it's really annoying when you go, but he's right. There's nothing more annoying for people when they are stuck. And if there are pulling over places, though, that's the key thing, because it's hard. You two don't drive tractors regularly. It is hard. If you've got a wagon on the back, you've got a trailer on the back, and a big tractor, you need the right bus stop to pull into, because you can't just perch it on the blooming verge, else it's mega dangerous when you then try and pull out again. So having a balance, isn't it?
Respect for other road users, Hugh.
It always strikes me as ironic, though, isn't it? When you've got there was a sticker campaign, wasn't it? I think the NFU did a load of stickers years ago to go on the back of the grain trailers. Thanks for backing British farming. This takes time to get to the oven, etc., etc. But then, yeah, so long as it doesn't take too long, they're still with you. Yeah, But yeah, it's always a tricky one.
Yeah, always a challenge to find the right balance. Hugh, the markets, what kind of balance are they in this week?
Well, the beef price carries on going up. Finished steer deadweight average this week goes up to 621.6. That's up from 606 last week. Live weight average is up 10p, 3.48 a kilo. On to the sheep rings. That continues to head on as well. The SQQ at 729.4, up from 710 last week. Compare that to a year ago, it was 662. Pig price, SPP, it sort of goes up, actually drops very, very marginally, 203.06. It was 203.3 last week. On to the arable markets. A vague bit of cheer. The wheat price has gone up by not even a pound. It's 180.2 versus 179.90 last week. That's still better though on the feed wheat than last year when it was 154.80. But the milling wheat is still pretty lackluster. 206.20. That is up again less than a pound. 205.70. So not really much movement there at all. Feed barley gets a little bit stronger. 159.10. Up from 157.50 last week. If we look at oilseed rate, 425.30, that's come up £4 or so on the week. Field peas stand on at 211.70. Field beans stand on at 212.10. And if you're filling the tractor up with diesel, 72.97, slightly up on last week's 71.9. That is the Wednesday ring round price on red diesel this week.
Revolutionise your livestock farming with Avent. Handle feed, bedding and manure with ease thanks to our compact loaders. With a vast range of attachments, Avent makes every task quicker and simpler. Enhance your farm's productivity. Search for Avent now.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Now, I've heard all about the inheritance tax talks due to take place in London between the Treasury and farm leaders. One of the farm leaders at those talks will be Andrew Connan, the newly elected president of NFU Scotland. Farmers Weekly's Phil Case caught up with Andrew Connan at the NFU Scotland conference in Glasgow, and he asked him what his message would be to the UK government on inheritance tax.
In the short term, we need to challenge UK government. That is essential as regards inheritance tax. 4 farming unions have come together and we will remain together on this with a joint approach. We will not give up on this. The impacts, if this was all to go through, would have catastrophic impact for family farming the length and breadth of the UK.
And so many issues that have been discussed at this week's conference, but what would be your kind of take-home messages and the first things that you are going to be concentrating on?
Communication's a great thing, and we need to get our message out to our members, to the public, the consumer. That is really essential going forward. But in addition to that, we need to start and deliver on some of our asks with government. We need to see fit for purpose funding going forward. Bear in mind the fantastic investment that farming gives back to government. And we need to see again a balance of species management that was announced today. First Minister stated that they will not allow the legal reintroduction of lynx or any other carnivorous predator. We welcome the fact that to see new initiatives for the next generation of farmers coming through. We need help to get them rung on the first ladder. So multiple things going forward. So.
That's Andrew Connan, the new NFU Scotland president, talking to Farmers Weekly's Phil Case, who joins us now. Phil, we'll talk more broadly about the conference in a moment, but Andrew Connan, what's he like?
So Andrew farms in partnership near Ellen in Aberdeenshire. It's a 150-hectare farm, finishing cattle, and he also runs a small commercial sheep flock, and he grows spring barley. It's also a family affair as well. So he's ably assisted by his wife Pauline and his son Andrew and daughter Sarah. They're both in their 20s, help at home, but they also work on neighbouring farms as well. So there's a big farming pedigree across the whole of the family.
And he's certainly served his time, as it were, at NFU Scotland, Phil.
Andrew is a really steady pair of hands. He's got extensive experience, having been at the NFU Scotland Union for over 20 years. He's somebody with a vast agricultural background. He's also got good experience in agricultural finance, and he's a long-standing member of many NFU Scotland committees. He's been vice president for 4 years prior to his election as president. So he really comes with a wealth of experience, and he's really seen as somebody who's going to be very capable in the role.
Phil, I've been with a number of Scottish farmers this week at a conference, and there is some apprehension, I would say, amongst them about what's to come, not from the new leadership team, I hasten to add, but from what the government is proposing. Was there any more information on that?
I think the apprehension really is that the key word the buzzword that we hear an awful lot about in agriculture these days is uncertainty. And the push for greater investment in farming is critical. They're calling for a multi-annual ring-fenced budget, but as we all know, the budget now comes under a block grant, so it's at the discretion of the Scottish Government to decide how much budget that they're going to allocate to farming each year. So this year's budget allocation was about £680 million, which fell short of the £776 million that NFU Scotland were calling for. So that's the fundamental issue, really. Is the Scottish Government going to finance farming properly? There is a huge demand for direct payments to continue in Scotland, chiefly because of the terrain that they farm there, the less favoured area. And we did hear at the conference that there's 70% of direct payments will be going into Tier 1 of the 4-tier scheme, which is primarily designed to support farmers who are producing food and actively managing their land. So farmers were buoyed by that. And really, the farmers are telling me that they just want better collaboration and negotiation with the Scottish Government. There was a really poignant moment in Martin Kennedy's speech, as his final speech as president, where he told, and this was also like a note to Andrew Connan, he said, you've got to be in the room in order to influence policy. There's no point being outside of the room and shouting from the sidelines. So that was a clear message for Andrew Connan. And this is how they operate in NFU Scotland. That there was metrics introduced which showed that NFU Scotland is probably the biggest lobbying organisation of Scottish government compared to all the other lobbying organisations. And I think that farmers or NFU Scotland will be keen to carry on this process of really working closely with the government in order to own the policy going forward.
Phil, obviously everyone was a bit more buoyed up and a bit more optimistic at the Scottish conference, which is great to hear. Look, all of the devolves have been left hanging in some cases, haven't they, in terms of budget, in terms of how they're going to distribute the ag support money. It would be fair to say, from what you're saying, it sounds like the Scottish finally have got some sort of plan together. They can actually see to the future, because for the last 5-6 years, they've been treading water effectively, haven't they?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, previously there's been lots of calls for clarity. The NFU Scotland, they want to know what the future looks like, and there is a feeling north of the border that the policy is starting to take shape. I think one of the critical components of the policy, which Scottish farmers and crofters are really happy about, is the fact that there will be a large chunk of support going into direct payments, which, of course, this is quite telling, really. If you look at what's going on in England, for example, where we're stripping the payments away, and DEFRA has introduced ELMS. North of the border, farmers can be very happy that at least they're going to get this direct support, although there will be conditionality or more conditionality attached to those payments. The First Minister, John Swinney, he also gave a speech, which was by and large, it was very well received, I would say, by the audience. There were a number of key announcements. For example, and again, this jars a little bit with the announcements in England, but there was £46 million of capital grant funding, which is going into the Scottish agricultural budget. This is money that had previously been allocated but was taken away due to the cost of living crisis, but that is now being reallocated over the next 2 years. So farmers were very happy about that. There was also a few other sort of key announcements too. There was a support for ultra-high frequency EID for cattle tagging. I guess a new and emerging technology, and the jury's a little bit out on this, on whether or not this can properly work. But also there's really calls for the Scottish Government to do more to support farmers in terms of labour and the workforce. I noted that a number of farmers stood up in the audience and said, we're not doing enough. We cannot get the people to come and work on our farms. Quite often it's a 7-day job. And the Scottish Government and also the Westminster Government need to get their heads together and put some policies together to ensure that they have a strong and vibrant and willing workforce.
Phil Case from the Farmers Weekly news desks. Thank you very much. Hugh, this ultra high frequency tagging, is good for farmers in England too?
Do you know, I'm really surprised about that because they did a trial here on UHF tagging last year, Harper Adams and the government, and they actually came to the conclusion that the existing low frequency worked better, only marginally, than the UHF. The Scottish Government have been really keen on UHF tagging, and the main reason I get why is because the kit is a lot cheaper. So it's the same sort of kit that they use in warehouses. It's the same sort of kit, security tags in shops when you go out the door. It's what pings if they leave the tag on. And the stuff's a lot cheaper, like massively cheaper than the low frequency stuff, which is only really used in livestock, which is why it's expensive globally. But the odd thing is, to me, one, I have no problem with low frequency because I use it every day on my cattle and I have done for 7 or 8 years. But the other thing is, the ultra high frequency stuff on livestock isn't ISO approved, so it doesn't have an international standard, whereas the low frequency does. So I don't know how that has any implications with regards to trade and one thing and another. And actually, whilst you can point the UHF gun at a pen of cattle and say, oh, it's picked up all 10, surely you've got a bit of risk that it overspills. And the other thing is, if you're trading cattle, for example, you're going to want to count everyone through anyway. So I don't know. It's a weird announcement, given that I get that they're really for it, but given that it's not totally proven as a technology yet, but we shall have to see what happens. Meanwhile, by the way, we're struggling to get the Livestock Information Programme off the ground in England and refresh our cattle and all our livestock movement thing. And that project's been going on for forever, hasn't it? And it's cost millions and millions, tens of millions of pounds. And meanwhile, what happens this week? The Australian government turns around and says they're giving grants to all the software providers to help with the rebuild and to recode software for their new system, which is going to come online soon. So there's one of our biggest potential global competitors who has completely open access to our UK market, thanks to Boris's trade deal, and they're just about to upgrade their system, and we haven't even got ours out the trap yet. So there you go. An interesting announcement, nevertheless.
An interesting announcement for Scotland, a new NFU Scotland president, Andrew Connan, and we'll continue to bring you all the latest news about Scottish farming here on the Farmers Weekly podcast.
The Farmers Weekly podcast.
More than 70 farmers, agronomists and industry stakeholders gathered at the Northampton St Cinch Stadium this week for the highly anticipated AHDB and United Oilseeds 2025 Oilseed Conference, a match made in heaven for anyone interested in both oilseed rape and rugby. Northampton Saints aren't her team, but Saracens fan Louise held a nose and went along to ask United Oilseeds chairman Ben Jackson why he's still growing rape on his Lincolnshire farm despite 2 challenging years.
Up until harvest 23, we were in line with our 10-year averages, and harvest 23 and 24, where we started experiencing the pre-Christmas losses and the drop in yield, predominantly down to weather conditions, cabbage stem flea beetles, slugs, pigeons, etc. The reason we're optimistic, because the crop we put in for harvest 25, we are back to the standard losses we'd expect to see before Christmas, about 5%, and the cross itself looks absolutely fantastic. So taken in isolation, those 2 years were bad, but actually over the period of the last 15 years, we feel that might just be a blip, and we're moving through the other side.
And we've also heard today from other speakers about the use of SFI actions to de-risk the crop and increase the income from it. Is that something that you're doing on your farm?
Yes, we are. We'll have an application going in very shortly for precision fertiliser, for companion cropping, and for the summer cover crop following the oilseed rape harvest. Again, we see this as just putting a bit of a base income into that crop and taking a bit of risk out of it.
And the other thing that we've learnt today is that flea beetle seemed to vanish last harvest. Nobody seems to know why. Was that the experience on your farm?
It was definitely the flea beetle damage in harvest 24 and 23 were exceptionally high in September. This year we haven't seen anywhere near the levels of that for the harvest 25 crop, but we will be doing the initiative with United Oilseeds of larvae counts in our stems coming up soon, so that should give us a real indication of where where we think we'll be for this harvest.
That's United Oilseeds chairman and Lincolnshire farmer Ben Jackson talking to Louise. So Louise, Ben Jackson there, upbeat about oilseed rape, but this is still very much a crop with lots of challenges.
Oh, lots of challenges. I mean, it's a familiar tale, I think, isn't it, for many people? But there's no getting away from the fact that we've got the smallest crop of oilseed rape since 1983 that we've ever had. So they're only going to produce just over 650,000 tonnes of product this year. We have a demand for 2 million tonnes. So that just goes to show how far behind or how far back the oilseed rape area has fallen. 1.3 million tonnes are going to be imported. So, you know, we know why that is, or we know most of the reasons why that is. The risk and reward thing has totally got out of kilter with oilseed rape. Obviously, we've had the neonic ban and the flea beetle issues. And of course, now we've got the sustainable farming incentive and what that is doing to rotations and people's attitude to risk. So a very small crop, but actually some optimism I felt in the room on Tuesday that we may have turned the corner and the worst may be behind us. And I really hope that's the case because, my goodness, we need these break crops. You know, everyone's being encouraged to have these wider, more diverse rotations now. And of course, break crops are a really important part of that. But just leave you with this figure, which makes it 64% of the oilseed rape that we need in this country will be imported this year. So, we do need to get people growing oilseed rape again, where it's appropriate to do so.
Louise, this is everything that everyone said was going to happen in terms of the import when the neonics ban came in. Now, the flea beetle of obviously the last season, but is it presumed because the crop density is now nationally so low? Do you think that's one of the reasons why the flea beetle have disappeared, or certainly not the threat they were 3 or 4 years ago?
Good question, Hugh, because I don't think they really know what happened to all the flea beetle. But there were certainly far less of them at harvest 24 and then, of course, for the establishment of the next crop. So nobody's quite sure where they've all gone, but obviously having a much smaller crop may well be one of the contributing factors there. Yeah, I mean, are they just going to reappear again? We don't really know, to be honest. It may also be, of course, that there is less insecticide use generally now. So, whether the beneficial insects have come along or other things are happening which really help. But how strange. We had these 2 really terrible years, and a lot of people just couldn't grow the crop. Even if they wanted to, it just disappeared in front of their eyes. And then all of a sudden, the numbers seem to have dropped. One thing I think that might have helped, because there's been some research done by NIAB, which shows that if you cultivate the ground immediately after harvest, you do actually reduce numbers. So there's obviously some vulnerability of the pest and the life cycle of the cabbage stem flea beetle, which means that that cultivating process just takes care of some of them, before they come up out of the ground. So that's something that may have helped as well.
What is there to encourage me to grow oilseed rape, though, as a producer, Louise? I mean, it still looks pretty bleak in terms of the price isn't amazing. There's still that flea beetle threat waiting in the wings. Is there anything I can do as a farmer that you think, using SFI or various other things that can make it a more attractive break crop than it currently is?
Yes, I mean, there is, and there was a whole presentation on the sustainable farming incentive and how you might use that to de-risk your oilseed rape crop. So, one of the issues we've had with oilseed rape is that yields have been falling. So there was a good presentation done on, even if you've got a very low yielding oilseed rape crop, and by that, I think he used the figure of 1.8 tonnes a hectare. When you then stack in some of these SFI options, so the companion crops, the zero insecticide, the summer cover crop, those type of actions, you do get that figure, that financial figure, back up and make it, it does then stack up against something like, say, a legume fallow, having that instead of your oilseed rape. I mean, obviously, if you've got a higher yielding, and I think again the figure of 3.4 tonnes per hectare was used for that. And then you bring in the SFI, you're really bringing the contribution of oilseed rape, financially right up. So, yeah, the SFI is being used to de-risk the crop, very much so. So that's a good thing. And the only uncertainty with that is how long we're going to have the sustainable farming incentive for. But that's a whole other topic which we'll address at another time.
And Louise, there's this new stem larvae numbers survey as well.
Yes, there is. Yeah. And as you say, Johann, this is a new thing for this year. So a very simple process. And it's part of this whole oilseed rape reboot initiative. It's going to start very soon. And basically selected growers, and I think they'll know who they are, they're going to be sending plant stems into NIAB. And then they will then do the survey, see what the larvae numbers are in those stems. And then that will give you some information about what the pressure will look like later this year. So again, you can use that information to decide whether you're going to grow oilseed rape again, or if the numbers are a little bit high and the risk is looking too great.
And Louise, a busy week for you. From the oilseed rape conference, you then went up to the Base UK conference in Newcastle.
Yes, I did, and had a really good couple of days up there. Fantastic mix of speakers. So right the way from, international expertise from both Denmark and Canada, down to research that's being done in this country, and then also some farmer experience presentations, including a fabulous one about vegetable production and whether you can do that in a regenerative way, and another very entertaining presentation. Big shout out to Rob Buckley here, who spent 25 years in the aerospace industry, came home to run his family farm. And of course, he's been thrown straight in at the deep end, literally, because the first year his farm just flooded. The second year, it's also been extremely wet there. So it was a great presentation, and we all feel for Rob, and let's hope he has more luck in the future. But I think the really important thing about the Base UK conference, it is really a room full of farmers. Everybody takes something away from the event. So that's really important.
So, Louise, I'm tempted to sort of say, you say Rob Buckley, an aerospace engineer who's gone into farming and finding that it literally is more difficult than rocket science.
Yeah, I think he would rather that it wasn't more difficult than rocket science. But I mean, you have to feel, if you think about the last 2 years and the weather that we've had, what a time to decide to come back to the family farm after all that absence. And he did say in his presentation he was really encouraged by his parents and everybody not to go into farming. So to give you some idea, that first year that it was, the farm was flooded so badly that he had ducks all over it. And as he said, I thought I was an arable farmer, not a livestock producer. So actually his presentation was called using the SFI to stay afloat, because literally the water that he's had to deal with, that's been the only money that he's had coming into the farm in 1 year. So, great. But, I think he needs to learn how to calibrate his drill as well.
Well, I'm not going to let you tease me like that, Louise. What exactly do you mean by calibrating the drill?
Yeah, so Rob, in his enthusiasm to embrace his farming, he decided to grow a bicrop, which was I think it was a wheat and beans mix. But unfortunately, I think that the drill settings got the better of him. So he ended up with a really great crop of beans, but no wheat at all. So I think he's going to give that one another go. It was actually one of a very interesting perspective from Rob was on the sort of form filling and the admin that he's had to do for the sustainable farming incentive. And, he was just saying, why does it have to be this complicated? Coming from the aerospace industry, he said, they would not have put up with such a complicated scheme and the computer saying no, and you can't do this with that, and you can't do the other. So that was an interesting perspective from him.
Louise, the Base conference has been going for quite a few years now, but it seems like, it sounds like, from what you're telling us, it's really developed into something, a much bigger and better than it has ever been.
Yes, it's a 2-day event, packed with information. So, we covered everything from living mulches to vegetable production in a regenerative system. We looked at hemp growing. We learnt about making mistakes and learning from those. It really is a special event. Very good farmer attendance. This year it was in Newcastle. Last year it was in Nottingham. Not sure where we'll be heading next year. But it's people learn quite a lot from it, and they also have a lot of fun as well. And I think, Johann, you've said before, you don't meet many unhappy regenerative farmers.
Yeah, do you know, I've never met an unhappy regenerative farmer, not even a rocket scientist from the aerospace industry. But Rob Buckley, thank you for sharing that story with us, and all the best. And we look forward to following your farming journey, as it were, to the moon and the stars and back again. Right, that's about it for this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. Before we go, a quick reminder for you to subscribe to the Farmers Weekly podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really do like what you hear, please do, as always, leave us a 5-star review. Remember, you can email us podcast@fwi.co.uk, and if you're in the UK, you can also message us by texting the word farm followed by your message to 88440. Rocket scientists, farmers, whatever your line of work, we'd love to hear from you. We'll be back again next week. We'll have all the latest from that inheritance tax meeting between farm leaders and government representatives on Tuesday the 18th of February. But until next week, next Friday, and the next episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast, I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Thank you for listening.